Welcome to my sewing journey. Today I'm working on easy doll clothing. Now, the fastest way to make clothing for your doll would be to take some scrap paper, lay it down, and you want to be able to cover the length between her neck and her ankle. And you put the doll on the scrap paper, and then you're going to trace around her shoulders, around her arm, to make sleeves, and then down her side all the way down to her ankle. And this way it'll give you the length, width, dimensions of your doll. Now for the bodice for the dress, or if you made the boy Amish doll from last week, you can use the same technique to make his shirt. Now, the things that you want to note on this pattern would be, I did mine on the folds, that's why it's only half of it here. But you'd want that neck line, and you want the shoulders, and you want to make sure you add a seam allowance on this and a little wiggle room so you can get the shirt on and off, or the dress on and off. For the shirt, for the front, you would cut 2 of these. And you're going to add a little room, like about the width of 2 fingers, so that you can do the buttons down his shirt. For the bodice, I'd recommend cutting it on the fold because it does make it easier. You're going to add your seam allowances, and you should be A-okay with that, and cutting it on the fold. For the back of the bodice, or the back of the shirt, on the back of the shirt, you're going to cut it on the fold because you don't need a closure on the back there. And you'll want to remember this little half circle there, or maybe a U, maybe call it that, for the neck. And you want your shoulders. You're going to come down and around for your arms. But for the dress, you need to add just that little bit there so that you can have her get in and out of her dress, because you'll fold that over to sew a seam so that it's open in the back for her to get there. And you can use for a closure either Velcro, ties, as in ties like these to tie it shut, or snaps, or a button. Now the thing you want to be careful with is these 2 shoulder seams on the front and the back have to line up so that you can get the shoulder right for the doll to rest on her, or on hers or his shoulder. Now for the sleeves. Generally, sleeve patterns look like this. And that's how you would make it, with the half circle there, and then from the seam right here under her underarm down to her cuff. But let's say you're not very good with that. So what I would recommend, if you've never done a sleeve before, is to take your fabric and have the bodice on the doll, taking the fabric and pushing it in and under, and then folding these 2 edges and then top stitching it on there. That will work for you. Just remember to give yourself enough room for the seam allowances. Then you'll use a rectangle for the skirt, and I would just cut it about twice the size of her, because you want it to have a little fullness so it's not super tight, but you don't want it super pleaty, because there's, on an Amish doll, their stuff is a little plain. But if you're doing a regular doll skirt that you would want a little more, you'd add just a little more to it. And then you just sew it on, the right sides facing together. And for the back closure on mine, I did a tie, but you can do, as I said before, buttons or Velcro or snaps. For her apron, it's just a rectangle with a square. And that's all I did there, and I gave her 2 ties on the back for it. Now for her little bloomers, which could also be the pants for the Amish boy, you would lay her down, get that waist right there, length of that, and then you want to measure her waist, and then you're going to add a little room, because you want to be able to pull the pants up and pull the pants down. And then you get the inseam, the measurement from here to where your doll's legs begin, and you would draw it something like that. And you're going to cut 2 for the front and 2 for the back, and those 2 inseams have to kind of line up. And then you would just sew your 2 pieces together in the front, and this would be your side seam, and then you sew your side seams to the back. Now what I did with her is I gave her a little elastic for the waistband, which just folded it over and sew like a little, just like a little channel about this wide for the elastic go in. And I did the same on the leg, and then I sewed just a little right here just to hold that elastic right into that. Just a little seam there. For her bonnet, that was a lot of fun to do. I took a piece of fabric 8 inches wide, folded it, so when I folded it, it would be 4 inches, and I sewed it onto a circle with a couple little pleats. The circle was bigger than the head, and then I covered the bottom edge with a little neck flap thing to protect the neck from a sunburn, if she was a real person, but she's not. To cover the rough edges, it's just a little piece folded over on that. And then I made my ties by taking a piece of fabric, folding it in half, and just sewing down. And I made 2 of those. For the boy's hat, you would have the circle on the top of the head to consider, as yours might be different. Every doll's different from the size. You have the top circle, and then you would want to do another set of 2 circles where they're 1.5 inches wide for the hat brim, and then a long rectangle that covers the length of the circle for the top of the head, and you sew the rectangle to the circle and then the brim 1.5 one to that. Last but not least, we have shoes. If you did not do built-in shoes, you would trace your doll's foot, give yourself a little room on each side, and a little room at the top for hem, and you sew the side seam together, but not the bottom here, the side seam here, leaving this open, and then you take a little piece of fabric, just like we did here earlier in the last week's video, and you sew that around to give your foot dimension. And that would be the clothing for the Amish doll. I gave her a little quilt square, but she would also look cute with a basket. I hope you like this technique and idea. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for subscribing, and happy sewing.